It started with a question nobody expected to ask on a night built for elegance, applause, and perfectly curated Hollywood magic. Why was Meghan Markle standing at the edge of the Governor's Awards red carpet, unable to move forward? That question alone carries the weight of 1,000,000 flashing cameras, a dozen circulating rumors, and a single moment that seemed to freeze time in the middle of a night meant for celebration. You know those situations where everything appears to be going smoothly, until suddenly something snaps? That's what this night felt like. A moment too sharp to ignore, too dramatic to dismiss, too public to erase. And it all began long before Meghan ever stepped out of the black SUV. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let's start from the very beginning. Because to truly understand why that scene became one of the most talked about moments of the entire 2025 awards season, you need the full picture. Not the headline, not the social media clip, not the edited paparazzi angle. The storyline behind the storyline. The build-up that producers, publicists, and insiders never wanted exposed. But let's pause for a moment. Before diving into all that, ask yourself this. What does it take for someone who has stood on the most elite stages, walked the world's most prestigious red carpets, and lived inside the most heavily protected bubble of modern royalty, to be denied entry by a security guard who didn't flinch? What happened to Meghan Markle that night wasn't just about protocol. It wasn't just about a list. And it definitely wasn't about a misunderstanding. It was about Hollywood, power, reputation, and timing colliding all at once. At the worst possible moment. And here's the part that makes it even more unbelievable. This wasn't an accidental mix-up. This wasn't a last-minute cancellation. And this wasn't a case of Meghan misreading an email. There were whispers before the event began. There were quiet conversations behind closed doors. There were subtle shifts in tone among the organizers. And some insiders now claim that Meghan's denial was not only deliberate, but predicted. Let that sit for a second. What does it mean when an uninvited arrival isn't just unexpected, but allegedly anticipated? Let's go deeper. Picture the scene. It's the 2025 Governor's Awards, one of Hollywood's most respected nights. A room filled with the industry's most influential creators, veterans, and rising stars. Directors who changed filmmaking. Actors who built legacies. Producers who controlled entire empires. If the Oscars are a global broadcast, the Governor's Awards are a private council of the elite. It's quiet elegance, prestige, reputation, hierarchy. And into that world walks Meghan Markle, former actress, former working royal, and one of the most polarizing public figures on the planet. Whether people love her or question her, they cannot ignore her. And she knows that. She always has. But tonight was different. As Meghan stepped out of the SUV, camera ready, illuminated by the warm spotlight bouncing off the building's glass facade, there was a strange energy in the air. Some call it tension. Others call it anticipation. But everyone agrees. It felt like something was about to happen. Meghan, confident as ever, moved with the certainty of someone who believed she belonged there. The dress, the posture, the hair, the stride, all of it said, I am expected. And why wouldn't she believe that? She has spent years positioning herself as a Hollywood figure of influence, networking with the biggest names in entertainment, curating connections with executives, appearing at charity galas, hosting high-profile dinners, and attending events that cemented her as someone with a seat at the table. But a seat at the table is only for those the table recognizes. And on this night, something was very off. Security wasn't moving toward her. Staffers weren't gesturing her forward. Photographers, usually starved for the perfect Meghan shot, weren't yelling her name as loudly as usual. If you watch the videos now, you can almost see the hesitation in the air, like people were trying to figure out whether to commit to capturing the moment or wait for something to develop. And something did. When Meghan approached the first security checkpoint, the guard didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't wave her through. He put his hand up. Imagine that. A hand raised. Not in greeting, but in refusal. The red carpet crowd shifted. Conversations stalled. Heads turned. Even those who weren't looking suddenly felt compelled to look. And Meghan? For a moment, just a brief, fleeting moment, there was a hint of confusion in her eyes. Not fear, not anger, just confusion, the kind that whispers a single thought. This can't be happening. Security asked for her name. Not Ms. Markle, welcome. Not right this way. Just the classic. Name, please. Again, imagine that. A woman who walked into royal palaces, who once lived under a global security detail, who had her name announced in rooms filled with world leaders, being asked on a Hollywood carpet, "What's your name?" Now here's something most people don't know. At events like the Governor's Awards, the guest list isn't just a list. It's a declaration. It decides who belongs and who stands outside the rope. It says everything about relationships, alliances, politics, and reputation. So when the guard looked down at the list, then looked back up, then looked again, the tension became a living thing. Because the name he was looking for? It wasn't there. This is where the questions begin. Why wasn't Meghan's name on the list? Who was responsible? Was she misinformed? Was the request ignored? Was there an intentional block? Hollywood insiders whispered several possibilities, but the truth is layered. Now pause again. Ask yourself, how often does someone like Meghan Markle show up uninvited to something this public? Accidental or intentional? It doesn't matter. The optics are the story. And the optics were brutal. Meghan tried to explain. Sources claim she insisted she was expected, that she was told she had an open invitation, that she had been in communication with someone on the inside, that she wasn't just showing up for attention. She was there because she believed she was supposed to be there. But security protocols don't bend for belief. They bend for names on lists. Slowly but clearly, the guard informed her, "Your name isn't on the approved entry list." Those words hit the air like a dropped glass. Witnesses say Meghan's smile faded. Not completely, just enough for those watching closely to see the shift. Her team scrambled behind her, frantically scrolling through phones, checking messages, calling contacts. But the staff wasn't budging. And this is where the real story begins. Not with the denial, but with the energy that rippled through the red carpet. Some celebrities noticed immediately. Some smirked. Some sympathized. Some kept walking as though they hadn't seen anything. But one thing is certain, everyone heard about it. Because a moment like that doesn't stay on a carpet. It travels. It multiplies. It becomes a whisper, then a rumor, then a headline, then a wildfire. And it didn't end there. Someone else arrived. Someone Meghan didn't expect. Someone whose mere presence made the moment even more complicated. But we'll get to that. For now, you need to understand just how shocking this moment was. Meghan Markle isn't used to being told no. Not publicly. Not forcefully. Not with cameras rolling. And the humiliation of being stopped, not by a committee, not by an email, not by a publicist, but by a guard doing his job, carried an emotional sting that no amount of PR polish could soften. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because what happened next would escalate the situation from awkward to explosive. Details would emerge. Conversations would slip out. A leaked message would appear. A celebrity would intervene. And by the end of the night, the narrative would flip from confusion to confrontation. But all of that comes later. Right now, imagine standing in Meghan's shoes. Imagine believing you're about to enter a room filled with powerful people, only to be told you're not welcome. Imagine every camera pointing at you, not to celebrate you, but to capture the exact second your confidence cracks. Imagine slowly realizing this wasn't a mistake. And if it wasn't a mistake, then who made the decision? And why? The answer to that question would tear open an entire web of Hollywood politics, hidden resentments, private conversations, and months of tension leading up to this single night. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It was supposed to be a flawless moment, the kind Meghan Markle had built her entire post-royal brand around. A perfectly timed entrance, a calculated walk, a poised smile, the kind of cinematic arrival that made every photographer sharpen their focus and every online gossip channel prepare their thumbnails. But nothing about this night would go the way she expected. Let's start right where the tension began. In the exact second her SUV slowed at the entrance of the Ray Dolby Ballroom, where the Governor's Awards were held. The air was cool, crisp, and electric, the kind of evening where Hollywood seemed to sparkle like it was aware of its own importance. Paparazzi lined the designated gaps between velvet ropes, familiar chatter circulating like bees over bright flowers. Black SUVs rolled up one by one, doors cracking open to reveal stars. And then Meghan's vehicle turned the corner. The moment that dark SUV appeared, the collective energy around the red carpet shifted. Heads turned. Shoulders stiffened. Even people mid-conversation paused, not because they expected a scandal, but because Meghan carried a certain gravitational pull. Whether loved or criticized, she attracted attention like a magnet. But tonight, something was different about the atmosphere around her arrival. Normally, when Meghan's car pulled up to an event, two things happened instantly. Photographers shouted her name with a frenzy usually reserved for guaranteed headlines. Staff moved into position, anticipating her approach. But this time, the photographers didn't erupt. There were no shouts, no flashes firing at hyperspeed. A few cameras lifted lazily at first, as if unsure whether this appearance was confirmed or merely a rumor drifting into reality. She stepped out slowly, one leg, then the other, adjusting her gown with a practiced movement that said, "Watch this moment. Take this in." The gown was breathtaking, a deep, sculpted velvet, fitted at the waist, with a subtle shimmer under the lights. It was the kind of dress meant to be photographed, analyzed, praised, criticized, posted, reposted, dissected on fashion blogs. The kind that said, "I belong at the center." But belonging isn't always about clothing. Her hair was swept back into a sleek style that highlighted her shoulders and neckline. Her makeup was soft but glamorous, the kind that suggested 2 hours of preparation and a team that knew every technique in the book. Everything about her entrance was engineered for impact. But the impact didn't land. There was a hesitation, subtle but unmistakable, among the crowd. Instead of surging toward her with cameras raised, photographers exchanged glances. A few caught the shot, but not with urgency, not with excitement. More like they were documenting something they weren't sure would matter in the next hour. And Meghan noticed. Her eyes flickered for a moment, scanning the crowd. She maintained a calm smile. But even calm smiles have micro shifts, tiny flashes where uncertainty cracks the surface. You've seen this expression before. The expression people wear when something feels off, but they can't quite identify what. A slight tilt of the head, a breath that isn't fully steady, a hesitation in the next step. She walked forward anyway, and that's when the first sign of trouble surfaced. One of the security team members didn't move. Not toward her, not away from her. He just stood still, watching, like someone waiting for a signal that never came. Meghan walked forward with confidence, expecting him to step aside. He didn't. Something about his stillness shifted the air again. It would have been easy to miss, easy to interpret as routine, but Meghan felt it. The slightest resistance to her presence. She wasn't used to resistance, not in public. She was used to being ushered in, welcomed, announced, guided. She paused only for half a second, but half a second on a red carpet feels like an hour. And in that pause, the people around her took notice. Assistants in black clothing, staff in earpieces, cameramen scanning for drama. They all picked up the shift in atmosphere. It was subtle, but it was the first domino. Here's the thing about high-profile arrivals. Everything is choreographed. There are expectations, rhythms, patterns. And when even one small detail goes wrong, a light flickers, a guard hesitates, a camera points in the wrong direction, everyone in the vicinity feels the break in the pattern. Meghan continued forward, her team stepping out behind her, whispering, adjusting, analyzing. They were watching the same thing she was watching, the security guard who wasn't signaling her through. She walked closer. Still no movement. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most celebrities at that level wouldn't even approach the first checkpoint if something wasn't perfectly aligned. Their teams would intervene, correct, redirect, even stall the arrival if something felt off. But tonight, Meghan didn't have that buffer. Or maybe she didn't sense she needed it. She kept moving, step by step, toward the entrance. Her heels clicked softly against the stone walkway, a rhythmic tap-tap that usually blends into the orchestra of red carpet noise. But tonight, the tapping sounded louder, more isolated, like each step echoed a warning. She approached the checkpoint. Two staffers stood behind a sleek black podium, checking the digital guest list on their tablets. They whispered something to each other. One lifted her head and looked directly at Meghan. It wasn't a welcoming look. Not hostile, not cruel, just measuring, as if assessing whether to engage or step back. And here's where the hook of the entire night tightened. Meghan smiled at them, expecting immediate acknowledgement. One of the staffers gave a tight-lipped smile back, the kind reserved for awkward moments. The other simply nodded once, slowly, like someone bracing themselves. Then the moment snapped. The security guard, the one who'd been standing too still, stepped forward. Not aggressively, not abruptly. Just one slow movement that said, "Stop here." He raised his hand slightly. Not a full hand-up gesture. Just enough to signal a pause. Meghan stopped. The photographers stopped. The whispers began. And suddenly, the energy around the carpet crackled like a wire that had finally been exposed. Let's zoom in for a second. Imagine being Meghan in that moment. Imagine feeling dozens of eyes on you. Some sympathetic, some curious, some hungry for drama. Imagine knowing that every camera is now focused, not on your dress, not on your smile, but on your reaction. Her team was suddenly tense behind her. One assistant glanced at another, eyes widening just a fraction. Another was already reaching for his phone, scrolling frantically, as if hoping a last-minute text would magically appear to solve the problem. But the problem wasn't going away. The guard stepped forward again. This time, his voice was professional, controlled, low enough not to cause a scene but firm enough to draw a line in the sand. "Ma'am, may I confirm your name?" Those words alone carry a weight when directed at someone like Meghan Markle. They are words spoken to guests whose status is uncertain. Words used to differentiate between confirmed attendees and unexpected ones. Words that hint at a protocol issue that cannot be ignored. Meghan blinked once, slowly, deliberately, as though trying to understand why she was being asked something so obvious. She responded with her full name. Her voice was steady, but steady voices can carry tension too, the kind that grows under pressure, like a thin thread about to snap. The guard typed into his device. A staffer checked the digital list again. Another staffer whispered something into her earpiece. Then came the silence. The heavy silence. The kind of silence that wraps around a moment and holds it still, refusing to let it move forward. Meghan waited. Her team waited. The carpet waited. Even the photographers, sensing something emerging, leaned forward. And then something subtle happened, something small but powerful enough to shift the entire mood. The staffer checking the list swallowed hard. You know that gesture people make when they're about to deliver bad news? The slight swallow, the soft inhale, the hesitation before speaking? That's what she did. She tapped the tablet once more, looked at the screen, looked back at Meghan, then shook her head. Just a tiny movement. But in Hollywood, tiny movements have massive consequences. Meghan's smile weakened for a fraction of a second, barely visible, but visible enough for anyone paying attention. Her eyes widened just a millimeter. Her posture stiffened, as though bracing for confirmation she hoped would not come. And then the staffer spoke. Her voice was polite. Too polite. So controlled that the politeness felt like a cushion placed under a hammer. "Your name is not appearing on the entry list." The words floated out like a soft breath. And everything stopped. Meghan's team sprang into action instantly, stepping forward, raising phones, whispering rapidly, scrolling for messages and confirmations. But the guard did not move aside. He simply stood in position, maintaining order, enforcing protocol, and ensuring the carpet remained reserved only for those authorized. Inside, celebrities were laughing, talking, clinking glasses, unaware of the moment unfolding outside. But outside, the red carpet had become the stage for something far more dramatic than any acceptance speech. And this was only the surface. Because what no one yet knew. Not Meghan, not her team, not even the puzzled photographers, was that the situation was already out of Meghan's control. A decision had been made. Someone had made sure her name was not on that list. And the consequences were just beginning. Because as Meghan stood frozen at the checkpoint, absorbing what was happening, a figure appeared behind her. A figure who would make everything more complicated, more humiliating, more explosive. And what came next would push the night into chaos. And no one saw it coming. The moment the security guard raised his hand, that subtle but unmistakable signal to stop, the atmosphere around Meghan Markle hardened like cooling steel. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't dramatic in the theatrical sense. But it was definitive. It was a line drawn in the middle of the red carpet, visible to everyone with a heartbeat and a pair of eyes. Imagine that for a moment. You've built your life around entrances, appearances, curated moments, and controlled optics. You've practiced smiles, perfected posture, picked outfits that tell a story. And then, without warning, Someone puts up a hand and tells you, without saying the words directly, that you aren't allowed to walk forward. Let's be clear, in Hollywood, being stopped has nothing to do with walking. It has everything to do with status. And on this night, Meghan's status was in question. The guard didn't raise his hand like someone trying to protect her from danger. He raised it with the steady confidence of someone enforcing protocol. Someone who had already been briefed on something. Someone who was prepared for this exact moment. And that fact alone was alarming. Because nobody prepares for a denial unless they expect one. Meghan's reaction was almost imperceptible, just a tight, polite smile and a brief flick of her eyes toward the staffers. But her team felt the shift immediately. You could see it in the way they leaned forward, in the way their expressions sharpened, in how the tension behind her rippled like wind through fabric. The paparazzi sensed it too. They didn't know the story yet, but they knew something was wrong. And if there's one thing paparazzi love more than a perfectly timed photo, it's a perfectly timed scandal. Cameras angled upward. Micro-movements. Instinct. Opportunity. This was the moment they were trained for. A few of them took cautious shots, hoping to capture whatever was happening before it escalated. Others stepped slightly closer, trying to pick up audio from staff whispers, Meghan's responses, her team's frantic exchanges. Security maintained formation. The guard asked again, calmly, professionally, for her to wait. The staffer behind the tablet cleared her throat and tapped through the guest list once more, as if hoping that Meghan's name might suddenly appear through sheer willpower or digital glitch. But it didn't. The list held firm. And so did the guard. He didn't flinch, didn't adjust his stance, didn't pull back. He held his ground like someone doing exactly what he had been instructed to do. This is where Meghan's tone shifted. She wasn't angry, not yet. Meghan never goes straight to anger in public. She starts with confusion, then disbelief, then controlled insistence. It's a pattern anyone who has followed her public interactions can recognize. She leaned slightly forward, her expression tight but polite, and asked something quietly. Something along the lines of, "There must be a mistake. I'm expected." Not loud enough for the cameras, just loud enough for the staff. And instead of confirming her expectation, the staffer hesitated. That hesitation? It was like gasoline dripping near an open flame. Meghan's team stepped forward immediately. One assistant spoke with a clipped urgency. One started calling someone, scrolling, dialing, redialing. Another produced an email on his phone, waving it subtly toward the staff. But the guard didn't move. He waited. He watched. He observed. Let's pause here and talk about something important. At events like the Governor's Awards, staff know exactly who is coming. High-profile attendees are confirmed days in advance. Security has photos, arrival times, and access details. Anyone heading to the carpet without clearance is flagged instantly, sometimes even before they get out of the car. Which means if Meghan wasn't on the list, it wasn't a forgotten detail. It was an omission, a deliberate absence. Meghan's assistant raised his voice slightly, perhaps out of frustration, perhaps out of fear. Her invitation was confirmed, he said, holding the phone closer. We have the correspondence. The staffer glanced at the screen, brows lowering just barely. She looked at the message, then back at the tablet in front of her. And then she said something that sliced through the entire atmosphere like a knife through silk. I'm sorry, but this name is not authorized for entry tonight. The words were soft, but the impact was massive. Unauthorized. Not missing. Not misplaced. Not pending confirmation. Unauthorized. A word that implied restriction, exclusion, denial. Meghan inhaled sharply. Not a gasp, not a dramatic intake, just a small breath that carried weight. A breath that said, this isn't normal. A breath that said, this shouldn't be happening. Her posture changed. Shoulders back, chin slightly raised, that familiar mixture of steely composure and simmering disbelief settling into place. She glanced around the carpet, as if expecting someone to intervene. A coordinator, a publicist, a recognizable face, anyone with enough authority to step in and say, let her through. But no one came, and that refusal, that absence of rescue, made the moment even more uncomfortable. Meghan stepped forward a few inches, enough that the guard instinctively shifted his stance. Not aggressively, just firmly, a reminder that the boundary was still in place. Can you please check again? Meghan asked, her voice low, measured, threading tension through every syllable. The staffer checked again, tapping through the list with increasing discomfort. Still nothing. This is where the whispers began. Quiet murmurs behind cameras. Exchanges between journalists. Half-formed thoughts spoken into microphones that weren't recording yet. Is that Meghan Markle? Why is she being stopped? Was she supposed to be here? Was she uninvited? Is something happening? You can almost feel the moment tightening around her, like a rope pulling at every angle. Meghan's face remained composed, but her eyes betrayed her, just slightly, revealing the anxiety building beneath the surface. Her team was now fully mobilized, calling contacts, texting numbers, trying desperately to find someone inside who could fix this. But each second that passed without an answer made the situation worse. Meghan tried another approach. She gestured subtly toward the carpet, lowering her voice even more. "I was told my arrival was noted," she said. "Please check for any special access requests." The staffer checked, but the system didn't lie. There was no special access note, no arrival code, no green highlight, no VIP clearance. Nothing. Meghan's jaw tightened. A tiny clench, barely visible, but visible enough for those watching her closely. And people were watching. The cameras zoomed in a little. A few photographers snapped shots, just in case this moment developed into something bigger. Oh, it would. Because just as the staff was about to speak again, just as Meghan's assistant was pulling up another message, just as the air around the carpet thickened with tension, the guard said the words that would echo across social media before the night even ended. "Ma'am, you cannot proceed without authorization." A sentence that lands differently depending on who you are. For most people, it's routine. For Meghan Markle, former senior royal, global celebrity, and widely discussed public figure, it was a public blow. Her cheeks flushed. Not red, not embarrassed, just warm enough to show strain. Her lips parted, as though she was about to argue, but she stopped. She swallowed the reaction. Because Meghan doesn't explode immediately. She calculates. But her team didn't calculate, not this time. One of her assistants stepped forward, raising his voice now, no longer caring whether the cameras heard. "She was invited," he insisted. "Someone confirm this. Someone inside knows she's here." But security didn't bend. If anything, the guard's posture became more resolute, a subtle shift, like a soldier settling into position. Meghan's eyes swept the carpet again, looking for an ally, looking for a familiar face, looking for anyone who might intervene and say the words she needed to hear. She belongs here. But no one did. She stood there, perfectly lit by the carpet's overhead lights, her gown gleaming, her posture impeccable, but frozen, caught between expectation and denial, between confidence and humiliation. And the whispers were growing louder, like rising waves, like a tide of speculation gaining momentum. Then came the shift, the emotional pivot, the moment when disbelief hardened into something sharper. Meghan straightened her shoulders. She widened her stance just slightly. Her expression tightened. This was the Meghan who stepped onto stages. The Meghan who fought tabloids. The Meghan who challenged institutions. The Meghan who believed she was not to be dismissed. She opened her mouth to speak. But before she could say a word, something happened behind her. A voice. A presence. A shift in attention so sudden that even the paparazzi turned simultaneously, lenses swiveling like synchronized machinery. Someone had arrived. Someone Meghan didn't expect. Someone who would complicate the moment. Someone whose presence would make everything 10 times worse. And the guard, who had been so steady, so composed, so professional, stiffened. Just slightly. But enough to show that whoever had just appeared mattered. And what came next would detonate the night in a way no one could have predicted. Because the arrival behind Meghan wasn't just about timing. It was about power. And everything was about to change. There are moments in life that don't need shouting to be devastating. Sometimes it's the quiet statements, the ones stitched with soft, polite tones, that cut the deepest. And for Meghan Markle, standing under the bright glow of the Governor's Awards entrance, hearing those 6 simple words was like having the ground slip beneath her heels. Your name isn't on the list. If you've ever bought a ticket, made a reservation, or RSVP'd to something you genuinely expected to attend, you already know the sting of being told you're not on the list. But now magnify that feeling by 1,000 cameras, a dozen security staff, and the global reputation of someone whose entire public persona depends on being seen, acknowledged, and included. This wasn't just a logistical issue. This wasn't a mild inconvenience. This was a public invalidation, a reputational bruise delivered in the middle of a carpet meant for stars. And Meghan felt it. You could see it in the subtle tightening of her jaw, the faint narrowing of her eyes, the slight tremble that flashed through her posture before disappearing behind the armor of practiced composure. But composure only holds for so long when the world is watching. Let's rewind the last few seconds to capture the shift that led to this moment. A familiar presence arrived behind her, someone who would escalate everything. But before she even turned around to acknowledge their arrival, her attention was still locked on the staffer, the tablet, and the guard whose firm expression made it clear. She wasn't entering until something changed. Her assistant, the one frantically scrolling through messages, finally pushed his phone forward. "Here," he said, voice shaking slightly. "We have confirmation. Someone from the studio told us she was welcome." The staffer looked at the phone but did not take it. She didn't want screenshots. She didn't want forwarded messages. She didn't want promises. She wanted authorization, the digital green check that gives someone access. Meghan stepped forward half an inch, lowering her voice, trying not to let the photographers catch the urgency brewing beneath her calm exterior. "There must be a mix-up," she said evenly. "We had an understanding. I was told someone would take care of this." The staffer swallowed. The security guard shifted his stance. The tension thickened. "Ma'am," the staffer said, her tone painfully apologetic. "I understand completely, but your name isn't appearing on the list or the secondary access roster. Without that, we cannot allow you through." Another blow. Secondary access roster. That's the backup list. The safety net. The list for last-minute VIPs or special guests. And Meghan wasn't on it either. Now here's the part that will make your jaw drop. Meghan genuinely believed she was supposed to be there. Her team believed it too. Whether she was misled, misinformed, or intentionally set up remains unclear, but what's certain is that the confidence she walked in with wasn't an act. She didn't expect to be stopped. She didn't expect to be questioned. She didn't expect to be humiliated. But humiliation was landing anyway. Her assistant tried again. Another angle. Another attempt at control. "Can you check under Duchess of Sussex?" he asked, almost desperately. The staffer checked. Nothing. A second assistant chimed in. "Can you check if her invitation was logged under a foundation name?" Checked. Nothing. A third approach. "Try the entertainment partners list she was in discussions with." Nothing. Each nothing dropped like a stone. Now, let's talk about the human side of this moment. Meghan Markle isn't someone who handles public rejection lightly. Her relationship with the media, the royal family, Hollywood, and public institutions is fragile. Years of tension, headlines, and conflicts have shaped her into someone who expects resistance, but not like this. Not on a red carpet. Not at an event she fully believed she was aligned with. Her eyes softened for a split second, a flash of vulnerability. A split second that said, "This isn't happening. This can't be happening. Not like this." But Meghan has mastered the art of replacing emotion with presence. Within a heartbeat, she stood straighter again, adopting the regal, unshakable posture that once cut through palace corridors. She exhaled slowly. "There must be another list," she said, forcing a small, strained laugh. "Please check with the event director." A reasonable request, but not one the staffer could grant without being certain she wouldn't be reprimanded for breaking protocol. "I'm so sorry," the staffer repeated, her tone tightening with stress. "But the director has made it clear that only names on the approved roster are permitted to enter. I can call someone, but it may take a moment." A moment? Meghan didn't have moments. Not here. Not now. Not with cameras capturing every second. The paparazzi had become statues. Silent. Observing. Recording. Sensing a story brewing like a storm cloud. Meghan's team began moving more urgently now. One stepping aside, trying to get reception, holding the phone high like a lifeline. Another whispering into Meghan's ear. Another pleading quietly with the staffer, hoping for even a sliver of flexibility. But security didn't offer flexibility. Security offered procedure. And procedure doesn't bend for panic. The staffer looked at the tablet again, as though the name might magically appear this time. Her lips parted, then pressed back together in discomfort. And that's when she delivered the most devastating line of the night. The one that would fuel headlines, social media explosions, and endless speculation. "Ma'am, I need to tell you something." A whisper. An apology wrapped in dread. A confession she didn't want to say out loud. "There is no record of an invitation issued under your name or your representation." A shiver rippled through the crowd. No record. Not misplaced. Not accidentally deleted. Not a glitch. No record. The implication? Meghan was never invited at all. And the look on her face, a flash of pure disbelief, confirmed that she hadn't expected this. In that moment, Meghan Markle wasn't a duchess. She wasn't a Hollywood figure. She wasn't a power player. She was simply a woman being told she wasn't welcome at a place she believed she belonged. And the humiliation? It cut deeper because of who was listening. Because behind her, just inches away, the person who had arrived unexpectedly was now observing every second. Their presence wasn't comforting. It wasn't sympathetic. It was judgmental. And Meghan knew it. But before we get to them, before we dive into the identity of that witness, there's something important you need to understand. The phrase, "no record of an invitation," is not a small detail. In Hollywood, that's a message, a coded statement, a political signal. Someone didn't just forget to add her name. Someone had intentionally not included her, and the people watching knew it. A murmur swept the carpet. Some onlookers whispered theories. Some tried to pretend they weren't watching. Some simply stared in disbelief. One journalist near the barricade even muttered under his breath, "Oh my God, she's uninvited." The word hit the air like a slap. Uninvited. A word Meghan had never expected to hear in this context. A word dripping with dismissal, exclusion, and embarrassment. A word that, once spoken aloud, becomes impossible to bury. Meghan's eyes widened just slightly, the kind of reaction that only people standing within a few feet would notice. But cameras have zoom lenses, and nothing escapes them. Her assistant panicked. "This can't be right," he said. "Someone must have removed the name by mistake." The staffer gently shook her head. "No," she said. "This list was finalized 2 days ago." Once finalized, entries cannot be removed unless authorized by the committee. Authorized by the committee. That meant someone with power, someone on the inside, had made a decision. A decision that involved Meghan. A decision she wasn't aware of. And a decision her team could not reverse. Meghan's throat moved as she swallowed the humiliation. Her smile had faded completely now. Her expression was neutral, too neutral. The kind of neutrality people use when they're trying not to react emotionally. She tried again to speak. "Can you please call the event director immediately?" Her voice cracked just barely, but she steadied it. "I know this is a misunderstanding." The staffer nodded, moved toward a corner, and began speaking into her headset. Meghan stood frozen in place, her hands clasped carefully in front of her, fingers tightening slightly around one another. The assistant returned. "Do you want us to call the publicist?" "Yes," Meghan whispered. "Call everyone." Everyone. That one word revealed just how deep the panic had sunk. But before the staffer returned with an answer, before Meghan's assistant could get someone important on the line, before any explanation could begin forming, a voice behind Meghan cut through the moment like a blade. A familiar voice. A sharp voice. A voice that instantly grabbed the attention of the crowd and cameras. "Well," the voice said lightly, with unmistakable amusement, "this is awkward." And when Meghan turned to look, her expression changed completely, because the person standing there wasn't just a witness. They were someone whose presence would ignite everything that followed. And what they said next would shift the entire night into chaos. Awkward. That's the exact word the voice behind Meghan used, and it sliced through the tension like a blade. "Well, this is awkward. Not aggressive. Not mocking. Just amused enough, just pointed enough, that the words felt like they were dipped in cold sarcasm." Meghan turned slowly, and her expression, already strained, tightened even more, almost imperceptibly. But oh, it was perceptible. Cameras caught it. Assistants noticed it. Even the guard's eyes flickered with awareness. Because standing behind Meghan Markle was none other than the one person she least wanted to see at that exact moment. A-list actress and Hollywood darling Viola Davis. Now, let's be clear, Viola didn't have to say much. Her presence alone was a statement. One of the most respected women in the industry. One of the most decorated actresses alive. A woman who rarely steps into public drama and never entertains Hollywood noise. She's known for grace, discipline, legacy, craft. And she walked straight into this moment. But that wasn't the uncomfortable part. What made Meghan's stomach drop was something far more subtle, the expression on Viola's face. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't shock. It was curious judgment. A slight tilt of the head, a raised brow, a soft smirk, the kind people give when they witness something they predicted might happen. Viola's tone was calm, but loaded with subtext. "I wasn't expecting to see you here tonight," she said, her voice smooth yet firm, like a quiet bell ringing in a silent church. Meghan forced a smile, one of those PR-safe smiles tinged with panic. "I was invited," she replied, though the words trembled at their edges. "We're just sorting out a small mix-up." Viola's eyes drifted to the guard, then to the tablet, then back to Meghan. "Oh," she said simply, "just one syllable." But sometimes one syllable can say more than a paragraph. That "oh" carried weight. It carried knowledge. It carried context. It carried everything she wasn't saying aloud. And everyone nearby felt it. Meghan's assistant jumped in instantly, trying to protect the moment. "We're waiting to hear back from the director's team," he explained, voice quivering as he attempted to regain authority. Viola nodded once, politely, but her gaze never left Meghan. "And here I thought tonight would be uneventful," she said lightly, not malicious, but profoundly aware of the unfolding spectacle. That line alone made at least 5 photographers lift their cameras higher. Not because Viola was fueling drama, she wasn't, but because her mere presence turned the scene into a headline. When someone like Viola Davis witnesses a public denial, it becomes cinematic, symbolic, inevitable. She wasn't mocking Meghan. She wasn't attacking her. But she was undeniably observing. And there is nothing more humiliating than being publicly observed during a moment of loss. Meghan couldn't hide the flicker in her expression, that tiny flash of embarrassment, frustration, and disbelief that crossed her face before she masked it with poise. Viola's presence changed the entire dynamic because she wasn't a random celebrity. She was a powerhouse of Hollywood legitimacy. The kind of woman whose recognition in the room validates your presence automatically. But Meghan didn't have that recognition at the moment. Viola did. One celebrity being ushered in effortlessly while another was held at the gate. It was a visual metaphor too loud to ignore. Even the staffers at the podium stiffened a little, knowing that whatever happened next would spread everywhere within minutes. Viola slowly shifted her weight, crossing her arms casually as if settling in. Not to intervene, but to observe the scene unfold. "You know the governor's awards are very strict with their lists," she said, almost conversationally. "No exceptions. Not even for unexpected guests." Unexpected guests. Another coded phrase. Another soft blow. Meghan blinked rapidly, holding her composure by a thread. Her voice lowered, becoming more controlled. "I wasn't unexpected," she insisted. "Someone confirmed we were good to come." Viola nodded once, almost sympathetically, but the way she said her next words made the entire carpet freeze. "Well, whoever told you that might not have been the right someone." Ouch. That was the moment Meghan's assistant winced. It was also the moment the photographers sharpened their focus. Because hidden in Viola's tone was something that people immediately picked up on, the suggestion that someone had misled Meghan. And whether intentional or not, the implication was brutal. Someone had set Meghan up to fail. Meghan inhaled deeply. "I appreciate your concern," she said, forcing the warmth in her voice. "But this will be sorted out." Viola gave a slow, thoughtful nod. But then she glanced at the staffer with the tablet again, and the look she exchanged with her was telling, respectful, but aligned. As though they both understood something Meghan didn't. Meghan saw it too. Her eyes flickered with something that looked dangerously close to panic. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't a forgotten email. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a decision. And Viola Davis knew it. Maybe not the details. Maybe not the politics. But she knew enough. Because here's something most people don't know. Hollywood veterans like Viola don't show up confused to events like these. They know exactly who is invited. They know exactly who is expected. They know exactly who belongs. Which meant something enormous. If Viola was surprised to see Meghan, then the industry itself had not expected her. Meghan's breath became shallower. She tried to maintain her smile, but it was slipping. Then, and here's where the moment became unforgettable, Viola stepped forward toward the guard, expecting to be ushered in. Without hesitation, without checking anything. Without a single question, the guard stepped aside for her. She didn't have to give her name. She didn't have to wait. She didn't have to be scanned. She didn't have to be verified. She simply walked forward, effortlessly, with the grace of someone who truly did belong. The visual contrast was painful. Meghan, frozen, held back. Viola, moving freely, welcomed without pause. It was prestige versus uncertainty. Legacy versus controversy. Respect versus resistance. Before stepping fully past the checkpoint, Viola paused and turned back to Meghan. "Good luck," she said softly. Not cruel, not sarcastic, just sincere enough to sting. Then she disappeared into the event. And that tiny phrase, "good luck," echoed inside Meghan like a taunt she couldn't escape. Because luck was the last thing she had on her side. Meghan's team erupted into a frenzy behind her. Whispered calls, desperate texts, frantic voice messages. Every assistant working double speed, trying to salvage what was clearly spiraling into a PR disaster. But as soon as Viola walked away, something else happened. Something even more humiliating. A small crowd gathered behind the barricades. Not fans, reporters. And they were now openly photographing Meghan's stalled moment. Her crossed arms, her strained smile, her assistants clinging to phones like lifelines. The embarrassment was becoming permanent. Meghan exhaled again, sharp and shallow, the mask of calm slipping just enough for the cameras to catch. Her voice tightened as she spoke to her team. "Find out who handled this," she insisted through clenched teeth. "Find out right now." One assistant nodded, another typed frantically, another whispered into her ear, "We're trying." But it was too late. Because just as her team was scrambling, and just as Meghan was trying desperately to recenter herself, a member of the event coordination staff approached the podium. He whispered something into the other staffer's ear. The staffer stiffened. Then she looked at Meghan, and the look on her face made Meghan's heart drop. Just when Meghan thought this night couldn't get worse. The staffer cleared her throat and said the words that would ignite the next explosion. "There has been an update. Someone from the committee just sent a message regarding your arrival." Meghan's eyes widened. Her assistant froze. Even the paparazzi went still. Because everyone knew. Whatever this message said would determine everything. And what it contained would change the entire narrative of the night. And no one was prepared for what came next. The moment the staffer said the words, "There has been an update," Meghan Markle's entire posture shifted, not outwardly, but inwardly, like the sharp inhale before either relief or disaster. In her world, updates at events like this always meant one of two things. Someone powerful was stepping in to clear things up, or someone powerful was stepping in to make things worse. And tonight, nothing was going in her favor. The staffer held the tablet against her chest, as if guarding classified information. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't relieved. She wasn't rushing over to open the velvet rope. Her expression was the same carefully controlled mask you see on doctors about to deliver news they wish they didn't have to give. "Update," Meghan repeated, trying to maintain control of her voice. "What kind of update?" The staffer hesitated. Her eyes dipped downward. Her shoulders tightened. Her lips pressed together as though trying to filter the words. Meghan's assistant stepped forward first, unable to hold back. "Can someone show us the message?" he demanded. "We need to know who said what." The staffer exchanged glances with the security guard. A silent conversation passed between them. He gave a subtle nod, as if granting permission, and she turned the tablet outward just enough for Meghan's team to see. But Meghan herself couldn't read it from where she stood. So she stepped closer. 1 inch. 2 inches. Close enough to see the highlighted notification at the top of the screen. At first it looked like nothing. Just a short instruction from someone whose name was partially blurred by the device's privacy setting. But the content? That was the bomb. It read, "Reminder, Markle is not authorized. If she arrives, do not admit. No exceptions." A punch to the gut would have hurt less. Do not admit. No exceptions. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mix-up. It wasn't a clerical error. It was premeditated. And the most crushing part? It was sent hours before she arrived. Her assistant gasped. Another swallowed hard. One even muttered under his breath, "Oh my God." But Meghan? She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She froze. Completely. Like her body had briefly forgotten how to process humiliation in real time. She stared at the screen as though trying to will the words into meaning something else. Something harmless. Something less intentional. But there they were, black and white, undeniable. Do not admit. No exceptions. The staffer quickly lowered the tablet, almost as if embarrassed by what Meghan had just seen. The security guard stepped slightly closer, as though bracing for confrontation. But Meghan didn't explode. She whispered, her voice barely audible. "Who sent that?" The staffer shook her head. "I'm not allowed to disclose internal authorizations." That made the moment even worse. Internal authorizations. The phrase shot through Meghan like lightning. Because in Hollywood, internal doesn't mean assistant. It doesn't mean volunteer. It doesn't mean event intern. Internal means committee. Internal means leadership. Internal means someone at the top. Someone with authority. Someone with power. Someone who decided, officially, that Meghan Markle was not allowed inside. Her assistant repeated the question, louder, angrier. "Who sent that message? We need a name." "We have the right to know." But the staffer stayed firm. "I'm sorry. That information is restricted." Restricted. The word hit the air with a cold punch. Restricted meant the decision wasn't casual. Restricted meant the order came from someone Meghan couldn't simply call or confront. Restricted meant this wasn't personal confusion. This was organizational policy. And that's when the real question burst open like a wound. If Meghan wasn't invited, then who told her she was? Her team looked at one another in panic. "Check the email again," Meghan said sharply, turning to her assistant. There was confirmation. Someone confirmed we were fine to attend. Her assistant frantically pulled up the message on his phone, scrolling through their thread with someone saved as Studio Exec, LA. He held it up, displaying a highlighted portion. "Should be all good for the awards. You're listed." Listed. Another word that now felt like a lie. "Who sent this?" Meghan demanded. Her assistant squinted at the message. I don't know. They said they were speaking on behalf of the organizers. We assumed. Assumed. Meghan snapped, voice cracking with frustration. "You assumed?" The assistant swallowed. It looked legitimate. They used industry phrases. "They've emailed us before." "I didn't think." "You didn't think," Meghan repeated. But Meghan's anger wasn't just about him. It was about the situation spiraling into something public and humiliating. It was about realizing that someone, somewhere, had given her false confidence. And the deeper truth? There are 3 types of people in Hollywood who send messages like that. A. Someone misinformed. B. Someone pretending. C. Someone strategic. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Because option C felt far too close to the truth. Her voice lowered to a whisper, strained and trembling like a wire pulled too tight. "Who exactly were you corresponding with?" Her assistant opened the contact. There was no full name. No company signature. Just a first name and a generic avatar. Meghan's stomach dropped. "You didn't vet them?" she whispered. He shook his head helplessly. "They were recommended by a friend." A friend. The worst possible answer. "Which friend?" Meghan asked, voice tightening. The assistant looked down. "Someone from the documentary team." Meghan closed her eyes for a moment. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough to see the outline of a horrifying possibility. She had been set up. The staffer cleared her throat, cutting through the silence. "Ms. Markle, do you have direct correspondence from the Governor's Awards Committee?" "No," Meghan said. "We were told everything was handled through the studio." The staffer nodded slowly, too slowly. "That would be unusual," she said. "The studio is not responsible for committee invitations unless the nominee themselves has requested placement." Meghan stiffened. She hadn't requested anything. She hadn't been nominated for anything. There was no protocol in place for her appearance. Which meant, the message saying she was all good had come from someone outside the official channels. A ghost. A setup. Or worse, an intentional saboteur. Meghan's breathing grew shallow. "You're telling me someone pretended to confirm my attendance?" "We don't know that," the staffer said carefully. "But we have no record in our system of anyone submitting or approving your invitation." Her assistant felt the weight of his mistake crushing him. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I thought." "Stop thinking," Meghan muttered under her breath. Her eyes began darting around the carpet, searching for faces, allies, enemies, anyone who might be connected to the setup, anyone who might have known she would arrive uninvited. But the crowd was shifting. More celebrities approached. Staff grew busier. The noise around the carpet grew louder, drowning out the tension of Meghan's moment, at least for everyone except her. Then something even more chilling happened. Another staffer, one with a more serious demeanor, approached the podium and whispered urgently to the woman with the tablet. The woman's expression changed instantly. Concern, then discomfort, then something like fear. She turned back to Meghan. "Ms. Markle," she said gently, "there's something else." Another blow. Another hit. "What now?" Meghan asked. The staffer bit her lip. "The message we received regarding your arrival wasn't the first one." "What do you mean?" Meghan asked, her voice tightening. The staffer hesitated. "We received an earlier message from the committee stating that if you contacted them about attending, they were not prepared to accommodate you." Meghan felt the words strike her like a slap. Not prepared to accommodate you. That meant they had anticipated she might try to attend. That meant they had discussed her. That meant they had taken precautions. She wasn't an afterthought. She was a preemptive concern. Her assistant shook his head in disbelief. "None of this makes sense. Why wouldn't they want her here?" The staffer inhaled. And then she said it. Something so stunning, so unexpected, that Meghan's face drained of color. "There have been some concerns expressed internally about past interactions with your team." Past interactions. Those two words hit like a hammer. Meghan's mouth opened slightly in shock. "What interactions? What concerns?" "I'm not authorized to explain," the staffer said softly. "But it was enough for the committee to instruct us that we are not to admit you tonight. Under any circumstances. Under any circumstances." The final nail in the humiliation. But before Meghan could respond, before she could argue, demand answers, or defend herself, the staffer added one more line. A line that sent a ripple of dread through both Meghan and her team. A text message from inside says this may be connected to an incident from a few months ago. An incident? From months ago. Meghan's heart stopped. "What incident?" she demanded. The staffer shook her head again. "We don't know yet. But someone is checking." And then she added, "We were told to expect complications if you arrived." Expect complications. Meghan's eyes widened. Because that meant one thing. Someone at the highest level had predicted she would come and prepared the event to block her. And if someone predicted it, someone wanted it. Her assistant whispered, voice trembling with fear. "Meghan, you don't think someone did this on purpose, do you?" But Meghan didn't answer. Because deep down, she already knew. Someone had pulled strings. Someone had manipulated her arrival. Someone wanted her to appear uninvited. Someone wanted her humiliated. Someone wanted this moment to explode. And in the next chapter, you'll learn exactly how the message that exposed everything was leaked, and why it would turn this entire embarrassment into something even bigger. Because what came next changed the entire night. And no one saw it coming. It started as a whisper. A faint vibration in the background of a night already charged with tension. Phones buzzing. Messages popping. Staff murmuring. But whispers, in Hollywood, often carry far more weight than they appear to. By the time Meghan Markle's team had pieced together the truth about her lack of invitation, another complication had arrived. A text message. A note. Something that nobody had expected. Something that would escalate the situation from uncomfortable to scandalous. The staffer who had been monitoring the situation discreetly whispered to her colleague, "We just got a message from the committee. And it seems there's a leak." A leak. In Hollywood, that word can turn a minor mishap into a full-blown headline in under 30 minutes. A leak doesn't just expose facts. It exposes motives, power dynamics, and every hidden thread behind an event. Meghan's assistant froze. "A leak?" he repeated, disbelief heavy in his voice. "What do you mean?" The staffer glanced at him, her eyes wide. "Someone on the inside shared the message regarding your attendance before you even arrived." Before she even arrived. That was the kicker. The revelation that, hours earlier, someone had decided to preemptively sabotage her red carpet appearance. Meghan's expression hardened. Her jaw tightened slightly. The flicker of controlled panic in her eyes became a sharper, more calculating tension. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't a miscommunication. It was deliberate. And deliberate in Hollywood often means strategic. Her team scrambled again. Phones in hand, hands waving, fingers flying across screens. Calls to managers. Calls to PR representatives. Calls to anyone who might have influence. Everyone trying to find out who had leaked the message, who had set the stage for the humiliation about to unfold. But in the high-stakes, tightly controlled environment of a governor's awards red carpet, finding the source wasn't simple. Messages were encrypted, emails were forwarded through multiple channels, and event staff were trained to maintain discretion, which meant whoever leaked the information had the advantage. They had control, and control in this situation meant power.